55 days ago, emergency evacuation efforts in Kabul ended. More than 100,000 people were airlifted out of the country, but thousands more were left behind. My next guest is leading an effort to rescue 18 families who have a direct working connection to projects funded by the Canadian government, which could make them targets for Taliban reprisals. Lauren Oates is the executive director at the not-for-profit organization Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. Dr. Oates, thank you very much for joining us today. Tell us about these families and what connection they have to Canada.
Well, they've worked for our organization, a registered Canadian charity, for many years in most cases, sometimes longer than a decade. And our organization has been funded by the Government of Canada for many years. And in fact, we opened our first office in Kabul with funding from the Government of Canada and have usually had funding from them ever since. So they have worked on Canadian government funded programming in Afghanistan in the area of education for many years, typically.
So describe the situation they are facing right now and the difficulties in trying to get to Canada.
The situation is that they're in information darkness. They have no response from Immigration Canada about the status of their inquiry, so that they're at the very earliest phase. They've tried to find out if they're eligible, and then after that, they would be invited to apply. And these 18 families haven't even made it to that point. So they're pretty discouraged at this point, given, we're a couple months into this crisis. We're long past the end of Canadian emergency evacuation flights out of Afghanistan. So they feel stuck there. They're worried, they're at risk, and they're feeling left behind by Canada, frankly.
You talk about these families are at risk. Can you describe what happens if the Taliban discovers the connection to Canada? What could happen?
It's really hard to say because the Taliban don't have very consistent policy. So you're really on your own in the country at this point right now. You're subject to the particular personality of the Taliban you happen to interface with. So you might get a friendly visit from the Taliban where nothing happens to you, or you could have another kind of visit. And, the risks are varied, but I just can't get it out of my head. A conversation I had with one of our staff recently during a project meeting, and I asked how everyone was doing, and he said, "Well, I'm alive still. I'm still alive." So that's people's state of minds right now, just trying to make it from one day to the next. So there's the danger of the Taliban. There's mild dangers like being beaten up, and there's rather more grave dangers like being killed, being tortured, being detained, having members of your family disappear, being harassed, being threatened. And then on top of that, there's all these other dangers that could potentially cut off our contact to them. The Taliban haven't been paying the electricity bill, so power has been going on and off. And obviously we rely on power to be able to communicate with people on the ground as the infrastructure. And the Taliban could shut off the internet, they could shut off mobile service. So we don't know how long we're going to be able to maintain contact. And with people not being able to leave Afghanistan, they could become sealed in. And we've had many, many weeks now to be able to try to get them out. And they haven't even received an update. We're working on your file. We'll get back to you soon. People just have no response whatsoever. So they're very, very worried, and they're in a state of panic at the moment.
55 days ago, those emergency evacuation efforts in Kabul came to a close. Did you expect that the world trying to get people out of Afghanistan, that things would be further ahead by this point?
Absolutely. I mean, at this point, there's been time to figure things out, to make systems that maybe didn't work well in the heat of the moment in that emergency situation work better now. There's lessons that could be applied, and everything is status quo. Nothing has changed for us since those evacuations were in play. We had a couple of people who were fully approved with visas during the time of the evacuation, and we had 3 in progress, and we had 18 that had no response at all yet from the Canadian government, and all of that still stands. It's all exactly the same all of these weeks later, and we're wondering why.
What message, if you have one, do you have for the government right now, for the Liberal government and to the IRCC?
My message is that these are Afghans who have worked for the interests of Canada in Afghanistan. They worked faithfully and loyally, and now they're at danger for that. And time is running out. Every day that goes by without any kind of information, update, answer from them is extremely nerve-wracking for them. And it is just contributing to this feeling of desperation. I think we owe them something. And at the very least, a glimpse into what's to come. If they can't get all the information about the process now, at least an answer, at least to know you're in the system. People call the helpline and they're told you don't exist. Your name isn't here. You don't have a number. You're not in the system. And so they have this sense of abandonment at the same time that they're feeling all these dangers close in. So I want us to do better for them and to remember what they did for us, that they represented our country with pride in Afghanistan. And now is the time for us to step up for them.
You say that some of these people, they say they feel they've been left behind. Is there anything that, that realistically, do you expect that the government is going to do anything in the short term to try and get these people to Canada?
My hope is that they recognize that our staff in particular are a textbook case of who the government of Canada said they would help. They widely publicized a program for Afghans that had significant and enduring relationship with the government of Canada. Those are their words. It's hard to think of an example that fits the bill more than that. These are permanent, full-time employees, long-time employees of the organization whose salaries were funded by Canadian government funds. And they delivered projects on behalf of Canada in Afghanistan. They tick every box, but somehow they're lost in the system. And at this stage, when they've not heard anything, it's making people feel really hopeless at a time when they really, really need hope. And I've been trying to keep that alive in them, but it's getting harder for me. At the beginning, I said, there's volume, they're dealing with a huge amount of inquiries, but they'll eventually find you, they'll sift you out of there. They have systems for this. Surely they have systems for this. But 2 months in, I find myself not believing my own words, and unsurprisingly, they probably don't either. So we need some kind of answer, and I think that there's a way to support them to get to Canada, at least to get them out of Afghanistan in the short term, and to safety where they could be fully processed and eventually make their way here. They applied a long time ago. My guess is they would have been within the first 1,000 inquiries that came into IRCC when the program opened. We learned about it very early through the Embassy of Canada before it closed. So they duly submitted their information. It was suggested to us by the embassy that our staff apply, and they all did. And all these weeks later, they've mostly heard nothing.
Lauren Oates, thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.